can go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn Keebler. I'm the editor here at the New England Review, and I want to thank you all so much for coming to our evening of fiction tonight. Thank you for taking some time out of the chaos and the darkness of this winter to celebrate with us as we toast Ernest McLeod and his contributions to fiction at the New England Review as a staff reader, off and on for the past 7 years as fiction editor. We have a wonderful lineup of writers joining us tonight, all of whose work Ernie helped to bring to our recent issues, and who I'm so happy to meet here on the screen, many of you for the very first time. Before we really get into things, I'm going to give you a couple of housekeeping notes. First, we will be recording this event. That's your cue, Leslie. So we can watch it later on, and anyone who had to miss it can see. The Zoom reading is also being run meeting style, as you can see, which is a little bit less formal than the webinar. So this is in keeping with the more intimate and celebratory tone we're trying to create with this event. And we thought it would also be nice for you to see who's in the room with us. Feel free to put things in the chat to greet each other, and you can scroll through the pages and see who's come in. But because it's meeting style, we also need you to make sure your microphone is on mute until it's your time to speak. And feel free to keep your cameras on or off, whatever you like, though we would love to see you. If you'd like to leave a message for Ernie or for any of the participants in this evening, you can put something in the chat. You can go ahead and do that, and we'll be sure to share those with everybody after the program. Also, we have a lot of speakers on the agenda tonight. We have 7 wonderful writers, and we expect this just to take about an hour in total. So it's really more of a sampler and a celebration than it is a full-on author reading, but we really hope that you'll be inspired to check out each of these writers a little bit more after tonight. They're each going to read a little bit of the stories that they've published in NER, which of course you can read in full in the journal itself. So once again, we're so happy you could join us as we celebrate Ernie's work at the New England Review over the past decades. And I can't think of a better way to honor his work than to bring together some of the writers he's championed, often behind the scenes, and whose work we've been so honored to be able to publish in NER. I think it's also very fitting that among the writers that we have here tonight, some of them have published in NER multiple times, and some of them are really just starting out. Because it's really been Ernie's task here all of these years to read submissions by all kinds of writers, and giving them each his equal attention and integrity. I know he reads all of these stories without any bias of professional accolades, without personal connections. He reads writers without the aid of blurbs or with the aid of previous awards. So that's really just about the work and its ability to communicate something essential, some kind of difficult to pinpoint truth to the reader. Ernie really is the first reader of so much work. Through his reading, Ernie has advocated for and brought to the New England Review distinctive stories of so many different kinds. We have long and winding, unruly, wild stories. We have structurally tight and well-crafted stories. He's brought in stories in translation from Korean and Serbian and Spanish, just to name a few, and also occasionally a short story, something that's no more than a page or two. So as you can see, Ernie is always ready to be challenged. His expectations are always ready to be thwarted. I know that when he talks to students about writing or about the approach to reading new stories, he always encourages them to begin with the same kind of unassuming curiosity that he brings. And in his words, the question is to face each story with, well, what have we here? 3 of tonight's writers are in the current double issue, new and emerging writers Lukasz Grabowski and Nestor Walters, and also a writer who first published in our magazine nearly 20 years ago, Christine Sneed, a writer whose work we've been able to see develop and earn various other accolades through the years. We're also happy to welcome the accomplished novelist and story writer Lindsay, who is new to our pages, along with 2 other emerging writers, Andrew De Silva and Sam Simas, whom Ernie interviewed for our Behind the Byline series. And finally, we have Lori Ostlund, whose debut appeared in NER in 2005, and who most recently published a novella in our pages in 2024, and is now, and this novella is now a substantial part of her new collection called Are You Happy? So during his time at NER, Ernie has brought many new writers into our pages, but he has read and encouraged thousands of others. I've counted more than 4,000 stories since his second run as a reader at NER, which began in 2011. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of the longevity that he has had here at NER, I did a little dive into our archive. This is the very first issue in which Ernie was on the masthead as a reader. This was in 1998. The editor at the time was Stephen Donadio. And his first run out as a reader went from 98 to 2003. This was when stories came to us in real envelopes on real paper. Then he came back after a few years in 2011. By now, we're on Submittable and everything is electronic. He stayed on as a reader through 2018 when he was named a fiction editor, when I was editor. And then, of course, he's still on the masthead with our beautiful double issue, the current issue. And even though he stopped reading stories as of this fall, at least for a time, there's still a few more that he's selected and advocated for that are going to come out in the spring. So even though he has finished reading, we'll still be able to see what he's been up to for another few months. So I just can't emphasize enough the degree of discernment that Ernie has developed through his constant and patient reading over the course of decades. It's given him an alertness to trends and tricks. He has a real ear for authenticity and urgency. And he also has a deep appreciation for the difficulty of writing arresting and enduring fiction. His understated expertise and his generosity have really helped to make the New England Review what it is. Before I go, I just have one other thing that I wanted to remark on, and which Ernie has had a very powerful impact on here at NER, and that is his approach to working with our staff of volunteer readers. As a staff reader himself for so many years, Ernie understands the job better than anyone. And as fiction editor, he always made it a habit to respond thoughtfully to his readers' comments, to offer them encouragement, and to notify them when one of their finds gets selected. I think what he's done is really deepened the human element of what can be a really discouraging process of submission and rejection. And he has helped some shape our approach in many ways that the public and even some of the writers whose work he advocated for will never know. So thank you, Ernie. And also thank you to all of Ernie's readers, some of whom I'm sure are here to celebrate with us tonight. With a magazine that publishes work straight out of the submissions queue, we really couldn't do it without you all. So thank you. Soon we're going to hear brief readings and remarks from 7 NER authors, the ones I mentioned a moment ago. And we're also going to have a chance to hear a little bit from our current fiction editors, Emily Mitchell and Maggie Sue. But first, we will have just a couple of words here from Ernie himself. So, Ernie, take it away.
Thank you, Carolyn. I hesitate to add anything after that generous introduction. But I did want to remark about all that these years at NER have meant to me, and especially my the past 7 years as fiction editor, where I got to work with wonderful readers along with the editors and everyone in the home team at NER. And I was thinking, you mentioned the dialogue between the editors and readers and how important that is. And then we would often have, staff meetings and discuss stories. And just there's a lot of in-house discussion of stories, and also a lot of in-house rooting for people, and little heartbreaks when somebody almost made it and then didn't quite make the cut, or somebody who withdrew a story before we quite got to accepting it. So there's a lot of things that are happening inside NER, all of which were really rewarding and wonderful to be a part of. But one thing I was thinking about being missing is interactions with the readers, because as fiction editors, as you said, we're often behind the scenes, which is a very comfortable place for me. but it's a lot of the times after a story is accepted, we would send our congratulations, and then the writer would work with Carolyn on edits and sometimes revisions. But I rarely got to tell the writers how much their stories meant to me, and how much I appreciated them sending to us and having that sort of faith. So I think it's a real honor and privilege tonight to not only meet some writers I didn't know previously, but also to get to hear them read and see their faces. So that's just a real treat for me. So I'm appreciative of this event, especially for that. I think that's it, but just thank you to all who are viewing and all who are participating. I appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing everyone.
Thank you, Ernie. I know we're going to miss you so much, but we'll rope you back in some way or another. I know you won't be able to stay away for too long. So now we're going to begin our readings, and our program is going to go pretty quickly. So what we're going to do is have each reader come one after the other. And instead of taking time to read out bios or introduce them one by one, Leslie is going to put into the chat the bios. So you'll learn a little bit more about each of the writers there. And the order they're going to read is going to be Christine Sneed, Sam Simas, Lindsay All, Nestor Walters, then a few words from fiction editor Emily Mitchell. Then we'll have Andrew De Silva, Lukasz Grabowski, Lori Ostlund, and then a few words from our new fiction editor, Maggie Sue. So let's begin now with Christine Sneed. Christine, you're up.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much for the invitation to read this evening. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here. Stephen Donadio and Carolyn accepted my first story, This Parrot is Hilarious, so long ago, and it just made an enormous difference in my life. When Carolyn told me Ernie began his work with NER in 1998, I realized that he's probably also a member of Generation X. And so he might still have a pair of acid wash jeans and maybe a couple of skinny ties somewhere in his closet. And while I'm placing bets, I wouldn't be surprised if he learned how to drive like I did in a stick shift car. He's probably still recovering. I want to thank Ernie for liking my short stories and for helping to give them a home over the years in New England Review. I don't think it's an overstatement to say it's truly made all the difference in my life as a writer. Whatever adventures are next for you, Ernie, I hope they'll be lit by a warm and steady lamp, and that whoever helps you navigate is good with maps, and possibly more important, good at choosing snacks. I'm going to read a bit of the opening of my story over my dead whatever, which is in the double issue that Carolyn mentioned earlier. Skylar's application arrived in the HR portal on a Thursday morning and was forwarded to Catherine for her review on the same day. A record for Brett in HR, who shortly after Catherine began searching for a new assistant, was out sick for a week and subsequently gone for 10 more days on a Mediterranean cruise to celebrate his second wedding anniversary. Catherine's hope had been to make the hire within 4 weeks, ideally 3, but the search dragged on for 8. Most of this was due, she was certain, to Brett's lackadaisical review of the applications, more than 50 streaming in during the first few days after the posting went live. She hadn't known there were so many until her friend Trina, who worked in HR as a benefits specialist, mentioned it a couple of weeks into the search over Cinco de Mayo margaritas. Up to that point, Brett had forwarded only 8 candidates' materials for Catherine's review. She'd scheduled interviews with 5, but none had inspired enough confidence for an offer. Brett was the son of Catherine's boss, Angie, one of the agency's co-founders. Before landing at Fallon and Fife, certified public accountants, he'd been out in Silicon Valley, where he'd brainstormed app ideas and failed to sell them to developers, Catherine suspected. Otherwise, his mother wouldn't have had to bail him out and his wife, who reportedly made cornhusk miniatures of squirrels and foxes and sold them on Etsy, with a job Brett had no qualifications for and a move back to Chicago. Skylar, however, appeared to be overqualified for the position she was applying for. University of Illinois alumnus, 3.8 GPA, major in accounting, minor in communications. Both her Zoom and in-person interviews, I keep enlarging my screen accidentally. Sorry, both her Zoom and in-person interviews went well. She'd arrived on time, asked non-generic questions, and sent a thank you note. And after her background and reference checks were complete, Brett once more coming through despite the odds, Catherine called to tell her the job was hers if she wanted it. "I'm in, Kate," said Schuyler, interrupting Catherine's offer mid-sentence. "I just knew you'd hire me. We totally vibe with each other." "I need to tell you the salary and the benefits before you formally accept the position," said Catherine. "Oh, guess you can tell I'm super pumped," said Schuyler, laughing. Catherine glanced up at the flickering light above her desk, an abominable fluorescent tube she could also hear buzzing faintly. "Yes, I can tell." She paused. "One thing, I go by Catherine, not Kate or Kathy." "Catherine, got it. Same name as my aunt, but she goes by Kate," said Schuyler. Catherine could hear her drinking something before she added, "She's a trip. Tries to make me eat carob brownies and seaweed every time I'm at her house. And she's got 8 cats. 3 of them are diabetic, and another one's senile and craps everywhere. Kate's bananas, but I love her." This giddy, goofy version of Schuyler was both mystifying and alarming. She sounded a little stoned or drunk, possibly both. She hadn't been a compulsive talker in either of her interviews, and struck Catherine as smart and funny. Her long brown hair sleek in a business-like ponytail, her clothes stylish but not showy. Catherine recalled thinking, "I like her. This could work." Now her interior monologue was, "Oh God. Oh shit." Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here with you.
All right, should I just go for it? Yeah, okay, thanks. Thank you, everybody. I'm deeply, deeply excited to be here. Thank you to NER and especially to Ernie. When he accepted my story, Simple Instructions, he wrote a very nice note that said, "We're finally able to take one of your pieces." And I remember thinking, finally, like someone was watching. And it was incredible to me. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. And so I'm just incredibly grateful. So I'll be reading from my story, Simple Instructions. Harold is hacking the onion with a bread knife again. I pass him the santuku and say, "Use this." He sighs. He sighs because I have promised to allow him to make his own mistakes. After all, I have no claim on the proper way of dicing an onion. I'm no chef. To be honest, I've never pursued an interest far enough to define myself by it, and certainly not with a word ending in ER, painter, baker, writer, runner. But I am his husband, and now his fingers are edging too close to the blade. Out of a duty to protect him, I say, "Use your nails to keep from slipping." Harold pauses. He adjusts his grip, and I marvel at the miracle of simple instructions, the subtext difficult to extrapolate, to guess, or to misunderstand. And because I'm not brave enough to leave him, the next best option is to offer simple instructions, then get out of his way. I inventory the produce on the counter: tomatoes, bay leaf, oranges. I check the fridge for the cod, then ask, "Did you get everything on the list?" Silence bloats while he stares at the cutting board, a slab of ochre stained and scarred that he had gifted to me for our anniversary. "Well," he says, "I got the piri piri and garlic. I even found Saint George, but I didn't see any cod." Didn't see any cod. "But," Harold says as he reaches for the grocery bag, and from it withdraws an enormous mushroom. "A hen of the woods," he says. I close the fridge so gently it doesn't make a sound, yet the ceramic rooster teeters above the stove. I tell myself the cod, his carelessness, is unintentional, that despite having complained every year about how the salty fish bloats his fingers and how he dislikes the lingering taste of garlic, he would never intentionally supplant my needs with his own. We have different priorities, that's all. He sees things differently. Tia Malia would tell me that loving well is a matter of not looking too closely, and I would say to her, "Yes, but who wants love if it's afraid to look you in the face?" "I thought you didn't like bacalhau," he says. He's correct, that's the joke. Even the knockoff version I make, because no stores around here sell it, is too salty. Nevertheless, I won't agree with Harold. This is not and has never been about what I like or dislike. I promised Tio Silvino that I would make the dish for him every year on the day Tia Maria died. He is my only living family, and this tradition is the only one that matters to us both. But this year, preparing the meal feels like casting an incantation I no longer believe will work. Dice garlic, chop onions, simmer olive oil. I worry I'll miss one crucial step and reveal that I'm no longer capable of doing what I've promised others. I need to go to the market, I say. He releases the knife. Onions scatter across the board. I'm doing my best, he says. Harold always does his best. I know that, and I want to apologize for my impatience. I feel guilty for the way meanness pokes through my skin like some artichoke spine when I'm unhappy. And when I get like that, I don't trust words to cut cleanly through my feelings. I'm not a talker. I'm not a writer. My words sting or they are too dull to emerge. Maybe if I were better at expressing what I felt, I would know how to tell him that I don't want his best. As I pull on my jacket, I default to simple instructions. Please, I say, just pour this olive oil into the pan, let the garlic simmer, then turn off the heat. I linger in the doorway. His jaw is striking in that light. He is precise as he pours oil into the pan, and that precision has always made me feel safe. But precision is not enough, and the heat is too high. The oil crackles and smokes. The garlic, I know, will burn. I'll be back soon, I say. I cannot afford to correct him again, and the only way to stop myself from hurting us both is to leave. Thank you. Thanks for letting me read with you.
I'm sorry, I can't see my top of my thing. Can you hear me? You can't? Okay, sorry. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. For some reason, my screen disappeared on the top. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. This is really amazing. I'm just gonna go. I'm reading from this one. Several days into their visit, when Allison was touring hospitals with her stepfather and mother, they all paused in a room that had slits for blinds and an odd yellow light that fell into the room in stripes. Her stepfather was going to do an experiment. In front of Allison and Grandma Jewel and three strangers, her stepfather hypnotized her mother and told her mother to hold up her hand. He told her that she would feel no pain. He then took a thick, long needle and pushed it all the way through her mother's palm. They all saw it, the needle sticking into her palm and out the back of her hand. The sensation for Allison was distressing. Her own palm had a prickling sensation, even if her mother couldn't feel the needle through her own palm. It felt to Allison as though her stepfather had opened a door, and beyond the door there was nothing but air. No stairs, no deck, only white sky. They were in a hospital, and the floors all around them were off-white tiles. The walls were off-white, but the trim to the small window was a pale powder yellow. Allison was staring at the yellow trim when her stepfather pulled the needle out of her mother's hand. There was no wound, no blood. After her mother came out of hypnosis, she spoke and acted as she usually did, but Allison felt a slight difference, as though a small part of her mother was far away. The Chinese officers drove them to a dinner where 6 foreign doctors asked questions of 2 Chinese doctors about hypnosis and acupuncture. Allison could still feel the needle in her own hand. Late that night, back in their hotel room in Red China, after eating a dinner of white rice and fish with an orange Fanta, Allison couldn't sleep. Something odd had happened in the car on the way to the hotel. "You will have to try it," her mother whispered in her ear. Her mother was loose and easy in her body that evening after wine and spirits. Allison's stepfather was indifferent or annoyed, Allison couldn't tell which. But her mother was sitting on the back seat next to Allison instead of in the front seat with her husband. Allison didn't like it. She didn't like it when her mother got too close to her. She didn't know why, but it was uncomfortable. "I will have to try what?" Allison whispered back. "The needle. You need to let him hypnotize you. You won't feel the pain. It will be fine. He needs more practice. It will be fun." "No," Allison said. Her mother shrugged. She smelled like joy perfume. The smell bothered Allison. Everything bothered her. She did not want a needle in her hand. Back in Hong Kong, Allison walked alone in the afternoons, up a few blocks, down a few others. Never had she seen so many people. Several girls her age gathered in lines near the boats. They were going home from school, all wearing blue skirts and blue socks, black shoes, a white blouse, all with straight, shiny black hair. Allison went into a shop near the hotel and bought a watermelon candy stick. She also bought a magazine written in English. Teen. She had never seen it before in America. She was a voracious reader. She would read anything and everything in her path, but never had she encountered this particular mood or content.
Wow.
The articles were cheerful and bright, as though nothing could ever be wrong. As she read the magazine and ate the watermelon candy, she slowly began to feel soothed, as though the wondrous taste of watermelon and the blissful and serene information in the magazine could create for her a life without complications or strange emotions, just things that made everything right. A white suitcase, white shoes, lipsticks called fresh peach or wild rose, and beaches and seashells. Thank you. I'm going to have to unmute myself now. It's very tricky.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Ernie, very much. My first story. And thank you, Leslie, for getting this wonderful issue together. So my story, Nursery, follows Abner, who is a dancer at a late night entertainment establishment, who gets a call from his mother asking him to go help his sister and her partner take care of their first baby. The next few days were similar, Abner finding ways to clean during the day, rocking the screaming baby at night. He rarely saw his sister. On Saturday, while on a smoke break down the block, Abner called his mother. "You're doing a great thing for them, Abby," his mother said. "I'm telling you, every one of my friends that I've told is very impressed." It was a sunny day. Things were bright but all the same color. Empty is what came to Abner's mind, bones left in the sun. "And anyway," his mother said, "you could use a break from work, right?" Abner, in fact, could not take a break from work. He owed rent on his apartment and insurance on his car. He was behind on his assignments and would likely have to pay back his school's financial aid. So he called some connections who helped him set up with a local arranger of private gigs. The first one was a short drive away in a part of town where houses are set back from extravagant front gates. "Come in," this first client said. "Come on in." He led Abner to a room that had a bed, a desk with a few papers, and a closet full of winter coats. "Welcome," the man said. "Please make yourself at home." Later, the man lay face down on the bed, and Abner rubbed the man's back and shoulders. Abner kneeled, as he had been taught to do, with one leg on either side of the man's head, close enough to feel the man's exhales. "The problem," the man was saying, "is that even the people who know things can't seem to make sense. Here's a massive coral, they might say, that we don't understand how it grew so big. Then they swarm it with their oily sunscreen and their gas-powered drills and their plastic fins. Then they wonder why it's dying." "That's horrible," Abner said. The man turned over and lay on his back. He was a large man, the kind who might be seen pulling a train car with a rope in his teeth, but he looked up at Abner with a bashful reverence, as if Abner held a string the pulling of which would unravel the man at the seams. "What I'm saying is," the man went on, "what more do we need to know? How many ways are there to conclude that something needs to be left alone?" Abner said nothing. He moved to where he could straddle the man's leg and began adjusting the shape of the towel. Abner had been making small comments before, but he didn't make any more now that he was adjusting the towel. He had read somewhere that whales can sing messages to each other from as far as Australia to Alaska, along this certain layer of ocean where the decreasing temperatures met the increased pressure and the speed of sound in that layer was slowest. Back at his sister's, Abner tried going straight to the bathroom, but of course was interrupted. "You're back," the partner said. He stood in the living room with the baby and appeared to have given up on rocking it. I had some work to do, Abner said. Of course, the partner said. Then look, this guy is blowing a head gasket and Our Lady is having a busy day in the nursery. Would you mind taking over for a bit? I should probably shower first, Abner said. If he could, he would unzip and step out of himself, put his skin through the hottest wash possible, then run his insides, one by one, under clean, warm water. Abner, his sister called from behind the nursery door. It opened and she poked her head out. Her eyes were swollen and her hair seemed desperate to leave her scalp in every direction. I've been all day in here, she said. She said, please. So Abner rocked the baby.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nestor. Thank you, Lindsay, Sam, and Christine. And while we're celebrating fiction at the New England Review here, I also want to introduce you all to Emily Mitchell. She's been serving as a fiction editor alongside of Ernie for the past 7 years. And in addition to being on our editorial staff, Emily's also a writer of fiction, and her new collection is The Church of Divine Electricity. She's also a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Maryland. So here is Emily.
Hi, everyone. So thank you for introducing me, Carolyn. Ernie and I, as Carolyn was saying, started working as fiction editors at New England Review around the same time in 2018. And mostly we've worked side by side, each with our own teams of readers managing the high volume of manuscripts that a magazine like ours receives. But sometimes over the years, we've got to collaborate. We worked together to organize biannual Zoom calls for our readers. We talked over various issues in the magazine with Carolyn and the other editorial staff, and we discussed in depth some of the submissions in our genre, mainly, and I think maybe most importantly, the ones that we really admired and were interested in publishing, but about which we had questions or uncertainties or even reservations. And it's these conversations about fiction that I want to take a moment to acknowledge and to thank Ernie for now. Our editorial discussions, since we're all in different parts of the world, took place mostly in writing, with Carolyn and Ernie and I sending messages back and forth by email or on Submittable. And for me, those exchanges have been some of the most interesting and rewarding parts of the job. Getting into granular detail about this or that aspect of a wonderful story with my fellow editors, reading their perspectives and coming to see the story differently as a result has helped me to become, I think, a better reader and to think more clearly about what makes writing good. The care and insight Ernie has about fiction is truly remarkable. It's not surprising then that many of my favorite stories that have appeared in the magazine's pages have passed through Ernie's hands or been championed by him. I am still haunted, for example, by Lindsay Stark's amazing story, By Cal, which we published all the way back in 2021. Nor is it surprising that so many of the stories that Ernie brought to NER have gone on to receive further accolades. In just the last 2 years, and accepting several of the writers who are here today, these have included Darlin's Treasure Island Alley, which was selected for Best American Short Stories in 2023. Bradley Basil's Where the West Begins, which was listed as a distinguished story in Bass that same year. Michael Muldowney's Apis mellifera, a Pushcart Prize special mention in 2024. Carolyn Kim's The Hiding Spot, selected for the O. Henry Prize Stories in 2024. And Lily in Her Forest by Elsa Drukarov, and translated by Slava Fajbish. Which was selected for Best Literary Translations in 2025, and which was, I think, perhaps not coincidentally, one of the stories we talked about extensively before I went to press. That is an amazing list, Ernie. Thanks for bringing your brilliance to the magazine. We're going to miss you very much. And now we'll continue our readings. Andrew De Silva is next.
Thank you. I'm going to jump into it. This is from 46-2. And Ernie, I want to say something after I finish. So a little context. We are Meeting Ruth Barnhart in the Mojave Desert. She's a aerospace engineer out for a engine test of a rocket engine. The subcontractors gave her a bottle of water, a donut, and a set of earplugs. They were a handful of 60-ish aerospace vets, probably retired from Boeing or Northrop and keeping skin in the game with their consulting. The men led a tour of their concrete command bunker, hardwired to the engine test stand 15 yards away. Ruth smiled, took a few notes on her pad. The head subcontractor, Jeff, delivered her to the viewing area, a cement block structure out by the parking. Ruth checked her work email from the platform as cars began arriving from the desert. Cousins of the subcontractors, aunts with binoculars, the subcontractors' grown children and their young grandchildren. These launch abort engines weren't the huge ones, the ones that blasted the whole payload up to space, but they still put on a show. Monomethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide, boom, a roar that would rattle the bones in your chest. Jeff made a welcome announcement to the spectators and returned to the command bunker. At the railing in the warming desert, Ruth drifted again towards sleep. She had not had a proper night's rest since Ricky, her 2-year-old, slipped from her body in January of 21. He was born on Biden's inauguration morning. She remembered pushing to the Amanda Gorman poem, that exquisite young woman in that exquisite yellow coat up on the hospital television. Or the poem had been after, with the baby in her arms. She couldn't say for certain. The test site's PA crackled and Jeff gave the 1-minute count. Ruth came back to the present, to the desert. I don't see a rocket, a woman near Ruth said. There's nothing pointed up. They store them underground. The port will open, her husband said, gesturing to the engine installation. It was 80 yards from the viewing deck, past the bunker and the storage shed. Ruth leaned over, tried to be friendly. No launch today, actually. Nothing shooting into space. Oh, no, said the woman. I thought, it's a hot fire test, but we keep the engine mounted. Like if you keep your car in park and gun the gas pedal. So it's not a rocket, the woman said. It's an engine. It's not housed inside the tall missile-shaped thing, Ruth said. The engine wasn't housed in anything yet. Like the Terminator with its skin burned off, it was a complex and exposed series of tanks and pipes, bolted into a metal scaffold. But look, see the nozzle, the cone? Mounted horizontally, right there. She closed an eye and pointed. When we fire, when combustion happens, the flames will shoot out sideways. It's really something. You should expect it to really be something. The couple still seemed disappointed, like maybe this hadn't been worth the drive. Ruth chose to watch other people's children watching the engine, gripping the rail, thrilling to the countdown the way they should. 10, 9. And she found herself wondering, as she increasingly did, how had they all gotten off from work, these parents? Had they taken a personal day, or were they working from home? Were they getting 6 good hours a night? 7? Did they have sex with their spouses more than twice a month? Did they laugh cringingly on the inside while remembering their wedding vows back when they had proclaimed with elder millennial certainty that they wanted it all? She fit her plugs into her ears, 2 and 1, and the engine ripped to life. The light came first, a white-hot jet cutting across the desert. Then sound a moment later, a sonic clap so violent it made thunderstorms feel cheap. The children squealed. The skeptical couple remade their faces, awe and woe, the way they should. The engine ran for 2 more seconds, and then it exploded. On the viewing deck, removed from the ground zero fury, it came to Ruth as air, a violent pulse, a wave of debris whistling past her face. Near the engine, the corrugated aluminum roof of the storage shed popped 15 feet and rippled in the sunlight, like keys flying off a piano in an old cartoon. The test stand was consumed in orange flame. Ruth had never witnessed an explosion in the field, but they had always been possible. Volatile propellants, incredible forces, 1,000 components, any of which could fail under stress. For the Challenger, it had been simple rubber O-rings, gone rigid from the cold. That was the job for an engineer. Keep the system from failing under the stress of the world. All right, so what I wanted to, Ernie, thank you, is that this is a story where that happens in the first 1,500 words, and then there's 3,500 more words in the story of increasingly fewer pyrotechnics. And so when I submitted, I was like, yeah, is it just going to get rejected? It's like the most interesting thing happens early. Does the story peter out? And so I was so encouraged that you were a champion of this and saw that, it ends with Ruth in her sitting against her washing machine, eating a hotel pastry later that night in Los Angeles. And so it resolves in this quiet way. But I think you understood that this was a story about a working parent who just happened to have a very interesting job. It's a story about fallout and aftermath. And I'm just really proud of what we were able to put out together. So Much appreciation.
Hey, thank you, Carolyn and Leslie and NER for getting us all together for this wonderful reading. And Ernie, though we haven't had the opportunity to work together at length, like some of us have, I'm grateful I caught the tail end of your tenure here. So I'll be reading from my piece, which is in the current issue of NER, and I'll be starting just a couple of pages into the story. To ease the loss of his $700 a week, my mother takes on more shifts at the dry cleaners. The place is run by an older Polish man whom everyone calls Wiśniewski, essentially Cherry Man. Only 3 letters distinguish our surnames, but our financial situations couldn't be further apart. He immigrated 12 years before us and lives in a town so affluent and devoid of school-age children, it has no need for a public school system. Once, the 3 of us made the drive there, curious and seething because the landlord hadn't yet fixed our AC unit. The house was obese and had garages with barn doors and a turret with windows that scowled with blue light. I resented myself for being in awe. To break the silence, I asked if he thought himself a feudal overlord with that sprawling castle. No, my mother said, he's a prick. She brings home the musky smell of bleach and cigarettes and sweat. They encircle her like a wedding veil or a cast. The chemicals have drained the color from her oversized Old Navy tees. When the key turns in the lock as the days draw close, we drift over to meet her at the door, roused from whatever we pretended to have been doing. Hi, boys, she says, and something clicks and we all get to talking at once. My mother works so hard to sustain us, it scares me out of any naivete that still lingered from childhood. This only becomes apparent to me now that I spend all my time at home, sensing her absence from the perspective of the apartment itself. This 2-bedroom unit that holds us and lets us hold on to it, but according to the harsh vocabulary of deeds and collateral, is not ours. The only bookcase in the apartment stands at the head of the corridor that flows into the 2 bedrooms and bathroom. The heart of the estate, my mother often jokes. I sometimes linger there, twirling my fingers behind my back, on the verge of a revelation that doesn't come. Miłosz, Zagajewski, Szymborska, the greats all there, titanic and dead. I consider how low I'd stoop to live in the minds of others. My father insisted on bringing the books with us on the flight from Warsaw's Chopin Airport to Chicago's O'Hare. It was May 1st, 2004, and the TV had been blaring all day with rapid-fire punditry. Poland had joined the European Union. It must be a trick of my memory, I was only 7, but the osmosis of the commentary had persuaded me that this political event was the single best thing that had ever graced our nation. Quite reasonably, then, I wondered why we were leaving. In the end, they left several photo albums to make room for these volumes, some of which my father had procured illegally under PZPR, when the authors themselves had fled the country and published from a safe vantage point. The photo albums had been packed into innumerable shipping boxes that traversed the Atlantic on a cargo ship, though for my mother, it didn't make the parting any easier. I wonder if she feared the photos would change, just like she expected to change it in the States in the interlude before their arrival, distorting the alignment between her and the objects. But the photos never came, not the ones set aside for the tattered novels and poetry collections bound with a calfskin. The box and 2 others had gotten lost in transit. In the months after we moved, an intake of breath echoed from the closet every few days, my mother recognizing the absence of another article of clothing that now ostensibly littered the Atlantic seabed. As I get older, the idea of not accounting for everything that was lost makes me more and more uneasy, as if our limbs had been excised, but we couldn't be sure which ones. She likes to play the trump card of the martyrized photo albums when they fight, squeezing every last ounce of parable out of a crime without a perpetrator. The trouble begins in earnest about 2 weeks after the layoff. There are hushed phone calls taken in the bathroom. I hear a beer bottle uncap at 1 o'clock. A malignant breath remains caught in my chest. My mother's hisses, indecipherable, suck up the air at odd hours of night. Once I jolt awake at a noise, convinced she's accosting my father for something again, but it's only the landlord flushing the toilet, or maybe cats mating under the heavy heat of summer. In between helping my father fill out the weekly unemployment benefit form during designated time slots, I shipped my resume out and received the rare invitation to come into the office to prove how much the opportunity means to me. We have only the 1 car, a black 2006 Camry that my mother drives 2 miles to work. On interview day, this one for a regional trucking company, something heavily administrative, I put on my one suit, brown and slightly oversized, and set off for the laundromat to pick up the car. A taxi is out of the question. My mother is selective about what constitutes a reasonable expense. The heat oppresses, the day is bright but without a sun. By the time I get there, sweat dribbles down my thighs, the pant leg's too loose to absorb it. My mother shepherds me into the employee restroom where I undress down to my underwear and splash cold water over my face and pat down the rest with paper towels the color of phlegm. She walks me to the car and bids me good luck with a pinch on my shoulder. Makes me nervous, the stakes implied in the uncharacteristic show of affection. We've received many applications for this role, says the interviewer. She fondles a copy of my resume with fingernails clipped shorter than mine. The afternoon sun pokes in through a slit between the blinds, forcing me to squint. She doesn't let on. Maybe this is part of the process, a test of nerve. In light of that, she continues, what differentiates you from the other applicants? I nod my head in contemplation, calm, about to open my mouth, and then completely uncalm once I do. The answer I rehearsed 20 times whisked into a black hole. I'm passionate about poetry, I say, short of breath. My father, he was a poet. Oh, the lady says, shaking her head like she just woke from a dream. I'm so sorry. He passed? We stare at each other. Thank you. I swallow the dryness in my mouth. Yes, he's dead. I'm so sorry. She pats my shoulder on the way out to reception, and I find I don't mind being pitied. My father was a poet. He's dead. I try to twist the pieces to make them true, even if only figuratively. They would be in touch. For once, I feel I have a real shot. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My Zoom went into a whole other strange mode, and so I think that's what you were getting at, Lindsay, when you said, "Am I right? Did yours do something weird also?" Anyway, when Carolyn asked whether I would take part in tonight's event for Ernie, it was an immediate yes. Especially now, it seems important to shine a light on those doing good work in the world. I've known Ernie in various capacities beyond his excellent work as fiction editor. Not long ago, I came across this really lovely introduction that you wrote for a pair of my stories that were in the journal years ago. And a couple of years ago, when my wife and I entertained the notion of visiting Croatia, he and his husband sprang into Zoom action to give us advice. But perhaps I've come to know him best in a more roundabout way, via the work he has done with 8 or 10 of my students who have volunteered as readers for the journal over the years. Carolyn talked about this earlier, and I see many of them here tonight. I'm indebted to you, Ernie, for being such a generous mentor to all of them. So I thought that I would give a quick behind-the-scenes look at the Ernie effect by reading to you never before heard snippets from emails sent to me by Glenn Verdi, who started working with Ernie almost 6 years ago. Of course, I have Glenn's permission to read from his emails, and I will add that Glenn is not someone who overuses the exclamation point, but I am going to read these, I think, in the tone that Glenn intended them. So one of the first mentions I came across, I love reading those stories and corresponding with Ernie, nice guy. There are several more that continue in that vein. And then I am really enjoying the reader job for NER. Thanks a million for setting that up for me. Ernie is just great. I'm learning a lot from reading his notes that he adds below my notes on stories in Submittable. Last month, I was lucky enough to read a story that I thought was a definite yes, as opposed to a maybe or no. He read it immediately and he agreed. Then he gave it to Carolyn and she accepted it and called the writer it was very exciting. And he means that. He did not put an exclamation point there, but there were actually several more emails that referenced that acceptance. And then finally, I just wanted to thank you again for hooking me up with NER. We had a readers, editors Zoom call a few weeks ago. So I met Ernie. There also is not an exclamation point there, but I know he meant one there. Glenn, thank you for letting me read from those. And thank you, Ernie, for all that you've done and really for bringing out so much excitement in my students. I've appreciated that so much over the years. I'm going to read just for a minute or two from my novella that appeared a couple of years in New England Review, Just Another Family. My father spent the last year of his life discontinent. He'd always had trouble with prefixes. The day after he died, I entered my parents' house, the house I grew up in, to the smell of piss, the humid night air thick with it. It's the mattress, my mother explained, and I said, well, then the mattress had to go. I tried to haul it out right then, just dropped my bag and went down the hallway to their bedroom. I started with the soda bottles. There were 5 of them, scattered beneath their bed, 3 with urine still sloshing around inside from when my father had relieved himself during the night. I used a broom to maneuver them out while my mother watched, lying on the floor on the far side of the bed, peering at me across its underbelly and demanding that I call them pop bottles. She was sure that I was saying soda to bother her because she said there was no way a person could grow up saying pop and then find herself one day just thinking soda. As I knelt beside their bed, I felt something hard beneath my right knee. Why are there cough drops all over the carpet? I asked, using the plural, for I could see them, that the floor was dotted with them, half sucked and smooth like sea glass washed up in the dingy blue shag of my parents' bedroom. Your father coughs a lot at night. He sucks on them until he's just about to doze off, and then he'd spit them on the floor, my mother explained. Her sentence beginning in the present tense, but ending in the past because that's the way death worked. The fact of it lost for whole seconds, whole sentences. I used to pick them up in the morning, but he'd get after me for wasting perfectly good cough drops. Bettina's not here yet, I asked. My sister lived just an hour away, so I was annoyed that she had not arrived, but I was also admitting defeat. The mattress was too much for me to handle alone. You know she has a family, my mother said, by way of excusing her absence. Rachel and I had been together 8 years. We had a house, jobs, 2 cats, and a dog, so I thought of myself as having a family also. You know what I mean, Sybil, my mother replied. I did know. She meant that I didn't have children, but mainly she meant the 2 women together was not a family. Well, if she's not here in the morning, I'll call a neighbor to help, I said. But my mother did not like this plan. She felt a mattress soaked with urine was a family affair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's fun to see the behind the scenes once in a while too. I'm really glad that that was something that you were able to catch. Thank you, Lukasz and Andrew as well. Thank you, all the readers. It's been such a pleasure, and it's also an honor to publish your work. So we're really appreciative. So as we look here for a moment towards the future of fiction at NER, I'd like to introduce you all to Maggie Sue. She just started in as a fiction editor after Ernie's retirement this fall. And while she is new to New England Review, she's really not new to reading fiction submissions. Like some of the folks that Lori was talking about, she has been a volunteer reader for Plowshares magazine for a number of years. She also read for Cincinnati Review and Indiana Review, both times as grad students. And then she couldn't get enough, so she was an associate editor at Georgia Review before she moved on and has finally reached us here at NER. Her new novel, her first novel, is called Blob, a Love Story. And here is Maggie.
Hi, I just want to say few short words. Thank you all so much for sharing your readings. Before I was an editor or even a writer, I consider myself a reader. And so thank you, Ernie. I've loved reading New England Review for the past few years. And as Carolyn mentioned, I've been involved in literary magazines in one capacity or another for over a decade. And so I just love that lit mags are ephemeral. They offer kind of snapshot shots of moments in literary time. And that's what I love about New England Review stories is they're not perfect, but they're complex and they ask difficult questions. And I'm just so appreciative of getting to be involved in New England Review. And I'm honored to step into this role and continue Ernie's legacy of publishing fiction that showcases the depth and vitality of contemporary literature. And it's been such a pleasure to hear everyone read tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Thanks also to Emily and to Leslie Sines for organizing the event and running the tech in the background. Thank you to our wonderful writers for sharing your words. It's been fantastic to hear them leap off the page and to see your faces and just one more layer of that work. And finally, thank you to Ernest McLeod, and to all of you who have spent your evening celebrating fiction with us. We're so glad you could take a break from the world and be here with these words. And we hope to see you again. So thanks so much and have a great rest of your evening.